Hello, friends. I'm Rob Claus, and this is another episode of Building Your Business with the CCPIA. Today, we have two very special guests. We have Joe Denneler and Benn Garrison, both representing Elite MGA. But beyond that, I know Joe carries a lot of other hats. But welcome, guys, and I'd like you to add a little introduction to yourselves, if you would, please.
Good, Joe.
So thanks, everybody. And Rob, thanks for letting us join you. My name is Joe Denneler. I am an attorney. For 25 years, I've been a litigator. Most of my time was spent litigating home inspection claims for the various E&O carriers. Around 2018, we decided, we know so much about the insurance for home inspectors. Why don't we build a captive carrier? Because we know that risk and all the ancillary stuff that goes with it. And so we started that in conjunction with InterNACHI and started selling policies in 2020. So my role now is that I'm chief officer for claims and risk management for every claim that comes into the InterNACHI insurance program throughout the year for all of our thousands of insureds.
Thank you. Ben, what's your background?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. My name is Benn Garrison, and I am the National Program Director for Elite MGA. And for the past years, I've been insuring home inspectors across the country through all associations, franchises, everywhere in the country for their E&O and general liability insurance. I got my start in this industry in 2006, and in 2013, I joined Elite MGA to help them build a program. And I think it was back in 2018 that we had set up shop with InterNACHI and formed a program exclusively for InterNACHI members, and it's been a great ride since then. And as Joe said, we formed our own captive insurance carrier in 2020 to really bring a great policy and great risk management tools to home inspectors across the country, and doing a lot of the things that I feel like the other options for insurance were deficient in, and to really support InterNACHI.
Thank you. It's a tremendous amount of support. I know that you provide the residential world, but we're the CCPIA, the Certified Commercial Property Inspectors Association, and our key is talking about commercial inspections. And as we've talked briefly during the most recent InterNACHI convention, I know I keep going back and forth. We are a separate organization, a sister organization, but our key is we know as a group of individuals doing commercial inspections of the extreme vacancy of commercial options for our members. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that. And Joe, maybe you're nodding your head. What's your experience with commercial inspections for insurance wise?
Well, most of my life deals with the claims side of it, right? And so I always joke that nobody calls me when they're having a good day inspecting. I see all the worst stuff. But that's actually, when we're talking about commercial inspections, that's a very small universe of the claims that we see. I can tell you in our captive carrier, since 2020, I believe I've had maybe 5 commercial claims, and understand that we've insured commercial inspections through all that time. And a lot of my litigation work was representing commercial inspectors throughout the years. And so we look at that side of the risk, differently. And part of it is because most of our commercial inspectors, when they belong to an association like yours, they're not out there flying blind, just hanging a shingle and saying, hey, we're going to come out there and do your commercial inspection. There's credibility there that's lent to them by their membership in this group. And so we actually, use that when we think about the risk. And for commercial inspections, the risks are a lot less than doing the residential inspections. There's a couple factors that go into that, but primarily it's because the inspector usually has a much better access to the things they need to see. It's not somebody's house filled with all their clutter and their kids' toys and their furnishings. You're usually dealing with either a pure commercial spot or a mixed use spot. And I feel like from a commercial inspection side, it gives the inspector, if they're properly trained, obviously, it gives them the ability to find the things that are going to be important to that commercial owner, which obviously is a much different business source. It's also, in addition to that, a much more sophisticated user of the inspector's services. And so we have it. There's actually kind of a higher level of security and insulation that's built into that because of those things.
I've also found, coming from the field through my experience, that commercial buyers or commercial clients don't have as much passion towards their purchase. It's a business acquisition, and so they're not going to call you with a drippy faucet, like a residential. Oh boy, I wish you would have told me my faucet drips. I wouldn't have bought this house. You owe me $10,000. So that's
right.
That's always been a big advantage, and what drew me to commercial inspections 10, 15 years ago when I moved over from residential. Now, what's been your experience with the education side where of the consumer, where what I mean by that is in residential, that industry's been around for 50 years. And in commercial, we're really an infant. We're 10, 12 years old. I think CCPIA was trademarked in 16 or 17. So we're a relatively new industry. Do you have issues with that as you're looking at claims or insurance that needs to be shared?
Not, it's not bad. It's not anything negative on the negative side with that, again, because of what I said in terms of the sophistication of the parties on both sides of the transaction there. To your point, I think the commercial owner is much less likely to make a claim for something that's not a significant issue. Mm-hmm. And so in my mind, the risk, again, with commercial inspections is a lot lower than residential. The other point you made was the passion or the emotion attached to it. When somebody's buying a residence, that's going to be where their children are going to grow up. They're going to grow old and die. They're going to celebrate the holidays. All the good, bad, and indifferent that comes with family life is going to happen in that place. Commercial is there's a much larger space between the owner, the business, and the attachment to that property. And so it is a different kind of user. Educating them, though, even that sophisticated buyer, in a lot of states, we have regulations on the book, so the public can easily find out what a residential home inspection is going to be all about. It's right there. Here's the standard, and it's pretty straightforward. Commercial, we don't have that advantage. There's no public knowledge out there for them to go to. When I first started defending commercial inspectors in claims, a lot of them were using the ASTM standards and doing is it a PCA? Yeah, a property condition assessment. And so it was educating the buyers about what that standard was. That's usually the hurdle. And so what we've done with our commercial inspectors, we created a uniform inspection agreement for them, and it's really based on, a lot of it is my 25 years seeing how the public and juries and judges and arbitrators react to these agreements and trying to make them clear enough that the average American can understand it, let alone a sophisticated real estate purchaser like a commercial purchaser. And so in that way, we try our best, again, to bridge that gap of the knowledge of what they're buying. And it's been pretty successful. And I think a lot of that's based on the fact that, we don't have very many commercial claims that come through.
Well, so that brings us to a couple of different topics. And I know you mentioned the ASTM, and I try not to use four-letter words very, very often. And that's where I know I don't have the exact origin, but I think it was 15 or 20 years ago, Internachi published the first ComSop, the commercial standards of practice. And it's like a rock rolling down the hill. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger. It's the document, obviously, that is the cornerstone of the CCPIA. I'd like to ask a tough question. Since you've seen both, what do you think the biggest advantage is by doing an inspection per the ComSop versus another standard?
I think the ComSop are written, I don't want to say better because that's such a weak word, but they're written in a way that's based more on the experience of the actual commercial inspector versus a standard like ASTM that's created nationally. And it's really, most of those people that do those things and comment on those things are not the people out there doing what a commercial inspector does every day. And so I think that the ComSop are much more appropriately tailored to the actual work that's going to be done on a daily basis by the average commercial inspector. And that's important again. And they're written in such a way that they're clear. We actually, for our insureds that are members of your association already, we have agreements that we've helped them write. And it is, as the person who has to draft these contracts with a mind toward them being enforceable and being clear for the reader, I find these standards to be much, much easier to work with on my side of the fence, which again translates to, our ability to offer lower premiums on commercial inspection insurance because we know the product that's going out.
Yeah. And so now to speak to agreements, the agreement that you were referring to is the one that we offer our members, correct?
I believe that's correct. Yeah, we drafted it for use, and we did the same on the residential side with Internachi. Like that's kind of what, that's your first line of defense, and it's the people who are going to be responsible for claims. We want to make sure that first line of defense filters out most of it, if not all of it, and so that's what we strive to do with the agreement.
Yeah, for our friends that are watching this, that's the agreement I used for 6 years and almost 5,000 inspections. I took the agreement that was provided to me as my membership to the CCPIA, took that to my local council because I needed to make sure it was valid in the states that I worked, and made that part of the daily operation of my business. And it worked without knocking on wood. It worked without absolute fail for everything that we did.
Yeah. And, that's the other important thing too, to keep in mind with commercial inspections is, it is kind of, there's so many different aspects of commercial and mixed use buildings that fall into this, into this area. And if you write the contract in a way that opens it up to be able to use it in all these situations, that's a key element. But the other point you just made is a very good point, which is, we write these contracts, but you should, you're in a business in a particular state. You should always take advantage of somebody local to look at it who may have some more knowledge about consumer interactions with contracts in that state. And so we like to say we give you the template and it'll work out of the box. But like anything else, like your report writing software or anything else you do, it needs to be tailored for you.
Yeah, I think the benefit is in where we're at right now in the consumer side. Right now, the states don't have, of the 50, I think there's only one that has any definition whatsoever of a commercial inspection. They clearly define residential, and so ergo. If it ain't residential, it must be commercial. And
yeah. And the other thing I'll tell you is the claims that I have seen and the incidents that get reported, because in our program, we're kind of unique because we own the carrier. So we let all of our insureds report everything to us, and we don't count it as a claim unless we write a check. And so we see a lot of the things that other carriers don't see because their insureds are afraid to send them anything. But the ones I do see, I'll tell you where I see problems is that the inspector goes out to do that commercial or mixed use and tries to use the inspection agreement they use to do residential inspections to handle it. And it's apples and oranges. And they almost start creating a bigger problem for themselves because, when these things go to court and a judge or a jury has to make a decision and they see that you didn't even get the appropriate standard right in your initial agreement with this client, no matter what the facts are, that's going to affect how that determination comes down. Yeah. And so it's just silly not to create a nice picture to everybody who needs to see it, that you're adhering to something specific for the job you've been paid to do.
I didn't even, I realized that and I understand that. And now my mind just went to, because I review a lot of reports from our members. They'll send me a report. Hey, how's this look? Where am I at in the world? Taking a pulse, so to speak. And I'll read a report and they use the same template. And so the roof on this home is, and I would think that would go to what you just said, Joe, of, if you can't even get the word building versus home right.
Well, and you'll see it'll be organized just like the systems and components of a residential home inspection.
Yeah.
And what's worse is all the boilerplate that they have fed into the system is all keyed to home inspection. So in addition to the reporting structure being off, now you've got these boilerplate sections that are really talking about the scope of a residential inspection. And again, a lot of these products, you can manipulate them to make them work for you. But when you get a claim and that package is out there in front of the party that's going to decide the case, and they see that it doesn't jive with what you're supposed to be doing in the first place, the other side's going to pull in an expert that's going to go, well, why didn't you use the CompSop standards? That's actually a real standard for a commercial. And so it never works out well.
I remember in 2000, I'm old. I remember in 2016 when we launched our commercial division, we used a CRM product that helped us distribute agreements and secure payment. One of the industry leaders, and my admin team didn't link the right payable to the right agreement, and for the first month they were sending out the wrong agreements, unbeknownst to me. Oh yeah, we got it signed. And then all of a sudden it's like we're a month down the road and there's a couple of dozen jobs that were done with the agreement that I didn't know was sent out. And it's like, oh my goodness, how fast can you fix this? And so it's really important to monitor all of that.
Yeah, because you can't limit that universe until you figure out you have the problem.
Yeah.
And to your point, so you're going to, those ones you didn't know about, that they're the ones when your head hits the pillow, you're going to be going, okay, you know what, this is going to be okay. But nobody likes that kind of uncertainty.
No,
not in any market.
So I was working in a big city, and every time you saw the news and there was a building fire or a gas explosion, we were doing close to 7,000 inspections a year. You'd go, okay, get the computer out, honey, what was that address? Because you're just dead afraid every night of whatever's on the news.
Yeah, and we're a big purveyor of the idea of putting your head on the pillow and falling right to sleep. And everything we do is geared toward insulating people. That's really our reason for being here. So that stuff weighs heavy on us.
Well, and it's funny, I'm jumping around some of my lists, but I think of that when I managed upwards of 100 different offices at one time, and you get a manager that gets all upset about an issue. And I said, dude, you're either going to get a claim, don't have a claim, you're going to have a deductible, don't have a deductible, pay it, go to bed, and wake up tomorrow and go to work. Because that's why you have Ben and Joe in your pocket, because they'll fight the fight. You just go to work and make money.
That's exactly right. We treat it like your money. And because it is, when you have a claim, that can cause premiums to go up. It'll be a drain on your ability to run your business. If it's in litigation, you're gonna have to do a bunch of stuff. What we love to focus on, trying to get to all that before it happens and smoothing out the process. So if you do have one, it's manageable, and it's defensible, and it gives us the tools right out of the gate to do that.
And that brings me to another topic, and that is your aggression in the fight. I mean, I'd love to hear your point of view, because in years past, again, I'm going back 30 years of doing this. Most of my, if it went to insurance, but all I was doing is writing my $5,000, or at one point we had a $25,000 deductible because we got hit a few times, and that's back in those days. We had to have Lloyd's of London write our policy because of the size of our business and the amount of inspectors. We had 25 inspectors on staff. So what would be Elite's point of view on how we fight?
Well, so it's interesting because this is a topic that always happens, and the perception out there, I think, of the general public and perhaps, professional inspectors, is that carriers just roll over and write checks because it's easier. And, we're, again, because of we're being who we are, we're in the unique position of actually being the carrier. And what that means is that we share in the risk. We're not out here just selling somebody's policy. We have the majority share of the risk. So when I tell you it's our money, I'm one of the owners of the company. It's really our money. Now, we don't like to give our money away. And so that plays a big role in how we handle things. Now, obviously, if it's a legitimate claim, we have to pay that claim. That's what we're in business to do. And we have a duty to our insured to make that happen, and we will. But we will investigate that claim and make sure that when we write that check, it's for a very valid reason. And the other thing about our program that makes it unique is our policy requires that our insured consent to any settlement. We're not allowed to settle your claim without your consent. And so that adds an additional layer on us of involving our insured in this process. But what gets overlooked sometimes, and the reason that I think it's 95% of all civil litigation in the United States settles before it gets to a trial. The reason for that is eventually it's got to be in front of a judge or jury or an arbitrator, and they might not know all the nuances, and they might not pay attention for 2 hours. And do we want all those people making financial decisions for you and I? Probably not. But there's also the cost factor. And where sometimes people who carry insurance don't realize is, if I have to spend 25 or 35 grand on defense to prove you right, but I could have resolved the claim for 15,000, it would have been better for you if I resolved the claim financially, because your premiums aren't going to be affected that much. And whether you're doing business with us or buying insurance from somebody else, these things have a shelf life on your policy. That's why we invite everybody to report everything to see if we can make it go away or help resolve it before it hits that point. That's what we want our insureds to do. But we also make sure that our insureds understand that if you have a claim, there's a good possibility that your premiums will go up as a result. And so whatever we can do to make that a smaller hit, well, that's much better for everybody involved. But we do look at them very seriously. And the other thing is, all the people that deal with the claims on our side have direct experience with professional inspectors. If you're insured through a broker or agent who gives you a policy they have no financial interest in, they have no control over that. And the person adjusting your claim might be doing a property, a slip and fall in an hour, or an auto case tomorrow. And there's no specialization. We only deal with the professional inspectors and home stagers, designers, and decorators. And so we focus on those exclusively, and it gives us a much better insight into what claims should be settled and what claims should be fought and what those values really look like.
I know in years past, when I was shopping for insurance, we were always considered to be what as a surplus line,
Sure.
where there's no line item that says inspector. I think one year I was lumped in with dog groomers, and nail polish, nail salons and something else, just to make a big enough pot.
It's called miscellaneous professional liability in the business. And what that is, it's a cattle call. It's where they put everything they don't know. And so we used to get collection agents in some of the programs. There would be dog groomers, tree trimmers, snow removal services, all these things that the carrier can't categorize because they're busy with their $10 billion other dollars in premium. And that's what, again, with us, we only have to look at those, and so every person who handles claims on our side has been handling nothing but home inspection and commercial inspection claims and the ancillary services that go with them since we started the company.
That's terrific. So I think start the company. I think that's a good segue into our next section. And what I'm thinking is, you hit on it a little bit ago about training and about expertise and about knowing what the devil you're doing when you wake up in the morning. And so how easy is it to secure a policy from you guys? And why do you think being a member of the CCPIA is important for securing that policy?
So I'll let Ben speak to the procuring the policy part, and then I'll jump in at the end about the importance of who we're dealing with and what association they belong to.
And Rob, a lot of what we deal with are residential home inspectors who also do commercial or wanting to get into commercial. And so what happens is when they fill out the application, or if they're insured with us already, I had 2 calls today, for example, of inspectors that we already insure that said, hey, I'm going to get into commercial. What do I need to do? Well, all we need to see is proof of education through CCPIA, who is the one that we see the most, and we can add it onto their existing policy. And the beauty there is it's free of charge. We don't charge for it, but the caveat being is we want to see that they have some sort of aptitude, some sort of training, that being CCPIA, in order to get the coverage. And again, it's a free add-on. Go ahead,
Right. I'm sorry, but I was just going to say, and then for our insureds that are doing mostly commercial, right? And maybe we'll do that where they're the reverse of somebody getting into it. For example, somebody like you, somebody who's been doing this a long time and really their stronghold is the commercial side of the business. We rate that accordingly, right? Because there is a bit more risk, even though you're inspecting probably a much more expensive property and much more expensive mechanical systems on the commercial side. There's greater risk on the residential side. And so we can rate accordingly. That's why we ask, what percentage of business do you do in each of these fields? Because it makes it easier for us to predict what's going to happen. And obviously, if they're doing more commercial and they've been through your training, well, then it makes it easier for us to rate it. And we give discounts on that kind of training as well on the premium. Ben, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, that's no worries at all. And I think it's great. I love when inspectors reach out to me saying that they're looking to add commercial because they're invested in the business. They realize, and I think it's not a secret today, that the residential inspections are down, right? You look at the interest rates, you look at the lack of inventory. So how else to generate income? You've got to diversify your business. So getting into commercial, if I was a residential inspector in today's world, I would be looking to get into commercial. Theoretically, it's more money, it's less liability. You don't have to deal with a first-time home buyer who's already strapped because of their enormous mortgage payment due to a 7.5% interest rate, who now has, a $5,000 plumbing issue, or even something as small as a busted GFCI, busting your chops. It's just better. It's a much better way to earn an income, and I think a lot less stressful if you can, get the education and then get the business in your pipeline to keep churning out commercial inspections.
You forgot one thing.
What's
There's no
that?
father-in-laws either.
And your father-in-law on the inspection with you that knows everything.
No.
That was a termite inspector in another state.
You should, he should have found that. She should have found that. You got to call him back.
Yeah.
I had one of my insureds in Ohio. He called me one day and there was a termite issue, and the father-in-law of the woman buying the house, he was a termite inspector down in Florida, and he expected the inspector to take a mallet and knock on every single inch of the baseboard to see if there were tunnels, because that's, as a termite inspector, that's what he thought should have been done. So it never ceases to amaze me, some of the things that we see when it comes to residential, when it comes to claims or incidents. And just when I think I've seen it all, something else blows my mind.
My favorite quote is from in that context is from Augustus Swift from Swift Eckridge. He says, "I too am also learning." Where every day, if you wake up every day with the goal, I'm going to learn one thing today. That's what we do. And you listen to one phone call from one past client or whatever, I'm going to learn.
Yeah. That's why we call it the practice of law. Like, that's when I started working, when I was carrying somebody's bags to court for him, like as a fresh young lawyer. That was really what they told us. They said, look, it never stops. And ideally it doesn't. Ideally you learn something every day. And I think that's important. When
I'm teaching the 3-day intro class to some fresh inspectors somewhere in the country, I've always said, and I always treated my business as a practice, because every inspection I do, I'm going to learn something. I'm going to take some applied knowledge, and I'm going to have to adapt it to this new situation, whether it's a 1-year-old building or a 150-year-old post beam building that's in the inner city of Chicago that never got burnt. That's what we're going to find.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, especially Ben, you mentioned that you get a lot of phone calls from your insured that are InterNACHI members that want to move over and add commercial. Well, what if they're not an InterNACHI member? What if they're just a CCPIA member? Because we have 2 different memberships. Can they still purchase a policy from you guys?
Absolutely. There's no impediment there at all. It doesn't make a difference. So they can apply. We have 2 different application forms on our website for inspectors to apply, depending on whether or not you're a member. But if they have that CCPIA listed on their application, they'll not only get the coverage, but it'll be discounted accordingly.
Terrific. Yeah. That's important. Now, I'll put my head back into the machine of decades ago, and you get that special client, and we say special air quotes, and they're on the phone and they're booking the inspection and say, and I want a copy of your insurance. And
Yeah.
it in the home inspection world, our heads explode, our fingers bleed, and we're like, cancel the inspection. There are already going to be pains. Forget it. Not so
That's
much
right.
in the commercial. Can
No.
you speak to some history on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes back to the sophisticated user of your services, right? And so if I'm a business, I want to make sure that I'm protecting my business's interests and things. And I'm more apt to say, I need to show that you're insured. And we recommend even to our residential inspectors, who use subcontractors. Some of them use subcontractors for the wood destroying insect or the radon, or depending on where they are in the country, the sewer scope, whatever. And we try to impart to them that if you're doing that, you need to have a written contract with them. You're a business, and it flows the same way with commercial inspections. While there might be a wide range of types of buildings and owners, at the end of the day, they're running a business and they have to be able to show either to themselves or their shareholders, I've done this to insulate us from the risk of this inspection and purchase. And so it's just much more reasonable. And that's why our service folks, are always on call to get those certificates and get things right out there for these jobs. And it might be a job where it's going to go weeks, before you're finished, and you're going to have a bunch of different trades in there. It's normal for somebody to want to see that you're insured for that service. In fact, if I was the buyer, I would, that would be the first thing I would ask you too, because that's my job.
I would say 1 in 5 inspections I performed as a commercial inspector, I had either the client or the current building owner want to be listed on my policy as an also insured or additional insured. Now, could you speak for a moment on how easy that is to get that form sent?
Ben,
Sure.
why don't you go with that?
I had one just yesterday for one of my insureds doing a commercial inspection, and the seller of the property wanted to be listed as an additional insured. Is it completely necessary? Probably not, but I completely understand why they might want it. And it's an easy clerical thing we do on the back end. We have a service staff that churns out certificates. It's pretty much all they do all day, whether it's a certificate for a builder that wants to be listed, or in this case, the seller of a commercial property. Very easy to do. Oftentimes what happens is our insureds will come to me, but we have a portal right on our website where our insureds can request a certificate, and we turn it around within 24 hours, unless it's needed more expediently, in which case we can do it, almost instantly.
And the other thing we also provide, Rob, in that line is that if you have if you're being presented with some additional things for, say, your inspection agreement because of the job, or there's something unique about the request on the insurance side, then my department, will also be involved in that and take the call, and we'll look at the agreement that's been presented to you and kind of help you work through that. Or we know when to tell you, hey, this is something you really need your, Virginia attorney down there to look at this specifically. But we try to help our insureds and give them as much support as we can on that side, so they can be agile and adapt to the different jobs and different circumstances they're going to come into, where residential, you don't have that much difference from place to place.
Well, it's nice to know that you guys have a little bit of opportunity to be nimble, in this, because I mean, we have a monthly roundtable with the members, where we do a call, and we get 30 to 50 members that get on this call. And what came up this month was interesting. So many of our members are starting to get calls for some big jobs. 750,000 square foot, million square foot worth of buildings, where how easy is it for them to come to you and say, hey, I've got this special project. Can I increase my limits? Because I'm sure in a residence, your limits might be a 2 million, 1 million policy, or a 1,500,000 policy, where in this case, they might have to double it or quadruple it. How easy is it for you guys to be able to react to something like that?
We would have to find an excess market to write a policy that would go in excess of whatever their policy limits are. And then at that point, it becomes a financial decision, right? Because these policies sometimes, they're not always cheap, and it requires a separate application. But if the money you're making on doing a commercial building that size it very well might warrant it.
Yeah,
But
budgeting should include that. Your
Right.
budgeting
Yeah,
should always account for that cost.
Yeah.
so
I did a 3 million square foot shopping center back in the, I hate to say it, late 80s. And that took 6 months to do. But it was a project that had so much money in the project that we didn't have any problems writing a $10 or a $15,000 check for our insurance side, because that was put into our bid.
sure.
And so it was if we weren't afraid of it, then our insurance company wasn't going to be afraid of it, because they trusted in our processes even back then. So that's great. What are the typical policy limits that you're seeing right now on the commercial side?
1 million, 2 million is
1 million, 2
generally what
million.
we see. That's pretty much the standard.
When I think about claims, and I always shut my eyes when I do that and try to think of what's going to go wrong. And we teach and educate in all of our courses and classes the big three, which are the roof, the HVAC, and the parking lot. Those are the three most expensive things in a commercial building. And you stand back and if you do your inspection of the ComSop, we're an inventory. We're not really taking anything apart. We're not doing any intrusive investigations or being technically exhaustive. So a $1 million policy is not too much or not enough. It should suffice.
It's not. And the other thing you have to think about too is, we always, and rightfully so, when we talk about these things, talk mostly about the systems and components of the building. But you have another factor there when you're dealing with a commercial entity that has a building that's open to the public. And so you mentioned sidewalks, and that's one area, or parking lots rather. Yeah. Parking lots, not just the paving and making sure the lines are right and the curbing is right, but is it right for that average pedestrian or the pedestrian with some other significant characteristic? And so what happens is you have to add them in as well. And I've had commercial claims where somebody trips and falls at like some kind of hybrid open air shopping center. And, the commercial inspector who did that job is usually brought into the claim, maybe not directly by that claimant, but perhaps by their inspection client, because, that's how indemnity works. You pass it from party to party. And so you have to think about when you're thinking about buildings that are mixed use or open to the public, it adds a different set of factors in addition to the systems.
Yeah, that's where, in doing the exterior or even the life safety portions of the inspection and looking at those barriers to accessibility. And again, that's where the ComSop comes in. So,
that's right.
So one of the key separators that I have seen in the insurance securing world is when I'm doing commercial inspections, many times I'm doing buildings that have commercial cooking areas.
Yeah.
And not all insurance carriers cover them. And some actually go out of their way to say, we don't cover them and we don't even want you doing a building like that. Well, I've always run for-profit companies. And if somebody picks up the phone and calls me, they want one goal.
Right.
Give me money, and I accept money. So what separates Elite MGA from the others in the cooking area?
Well, so we'll definitely cover that inspection if there's a cooking area involved, but where the coverage won't come into play will be for the cooking equipment and any fire suppression related equipment. And so with your basic commercial inspector policy would not include those things, but that does not mean that you can't go inspect the rest of the property and feel secure that we're covering you for the rest of that inspection. We certainly will. We draw a line at those systems and components because that's a unique specialization. We talked earlier about miscellaneous professional liability. Well, the fire suppression folks in the restaurant industry also get thrown into that bunch, but that is a very distinct skill set. What a lot of our insureds do that I understand is they'll usually subcontract that part of the inspection out to a licensed, because the fire suppression equipment, for example, in most cases is going to require separate licensing. It might be by jurisdiction or just by state, but it's going to be there. And so a lot of commercial inspectors will sub that part of the work out. And that's where we help our inspectors by giving them a subcontractor agreement to use. So that sub is going to defend and indemnify our insured on any claims related to the kitchen cooking equipment or the fire suppression stuff. If you need coverage for that, if that is part of what you do, there's policies out there that can be purchased for those things. But generally we carve them out, but we won't preclude you from doing that building. That, how can you do that and say you're in business to help the people out there doing these inspections? But hey, if they have an oven, forget it. Like, you're not covered. Nobody wants to go through that process every time they take a job. To your point, we all like to get paid. Nobody wants to go through that process every time they take a job. And so that's why we just make a bright line rule. Or
turn them down. It's a supper club in Wisconsin. I'm sorry, I can't do supper clubs in Wisconsin.
Right. It's like, if we're going to be in business, unlike carriers that have billions of dollars and insure 10 million people, if we're going to be in business to focus on a specific area and support that profession, we can't with a straight face say, oh, by the way, here's half of the buildings you might be able to inspect. Yeah. We're wiping them right off the map. Yeah. Good luck. Yeah. You can't do that.
And oh, by the way, we don't insure childcare centers. Go.
Right. You just have to have the carve outs. And again, it needs to fit to the standard of practice that they're going to be using. And so it needs to be to these standards, right? If we know they're doing them to these standards, we as a carrier and the risk taker have a reassurance that it's going to be done appropriately and that we're not going to have liability for these other things.
I mean, you can't see it very well because of my green screen, but I do have the CommSop open, and it says in cooking areas, you should inspect for grease buildup, period. You should inspect to make sure the hoods are made of steel or stainless steel, period. It doesn't say you have to run them. It doesn't say you have to do anything like that. We're observers, and so that's great news. Because I don't like to be, again, coming from Chicago, I don't need to be fitted with concrete shoes. At least not from my insurance carrier.
No, we're here to support you, not to prevent you from making money. I think, that's where a lot of companies, they look at their own interests, and what's best for them. And, if you're going to take a risk, then you need to take a risk, and you need to stand behind the people you're promising to stand behind.
So let's see. You'll cover commercial cooking areas if we follow the CommSop. You guys like the CommSop. It's pretty easy to apply. You're also insured. You've got a portal, as well as you can make a phone call. Your limits are fair. But what about the deductibles?
Well, interestingly enough, deductibles serve two purposes. In some instances, our insureds like them and want to maintain them, because when you have skin in the game, it obviously reflects on the premium you're charged. Right. I mean, that's business sense. And so a lot of our inspectors, like to have a deductible, and we work with them to see what's actually, workable, right? Because you have to be able to pay it if you need to pay it. But some of our inspectors like to have a deductible or a sizable deductible and have control and skin in the game over those smaller things. But we also just launched a zero deductible program for our E&O and GL. And it's, again, it's based on criteria and the application that's being presented to us, but we do offer that option for inspectors who want to have everything handled by the insurance. So no matter what happens, they're not writing a check if it's a covered claim. And so we, in this last year in particular, we saw a need to have that offering out there for people who don't want to have the possibility of having to write a check on a deductible, say in a month like December, where their business might be dipping a little bit, and so in order, again, to accommodate the needs of everybody and our thousands of insureds, we decided that that was the way to go. And so when you apply for insurance with us, you can be presented with a zero deductible option as well. And again, but we also have all the deductible options we've always had, because a lot of our insureds, want a deductible in play because it helps with the pricing on the policy.
So what have we missed in this conversation? I just want to make sure our members understand the insurance side of the business. I'm thinking commercial inspection. Let me go backwards then. Is professional liability and general liability the only policies you're able to write, or do you also offer a workers' liability or workers' comp policy or any other type of policy?
We can do work comp. I get that question quite a bit because a lot of times these days, even the builders on new construction want to see proof of work comp insurance, and we can do it. For commercial, it might be a little bit easier depending on how the inspector is conducting their inspection. So, for example, if they're using a drone to inspect the roof, well, work comp insurance carriers would much prefer that an inspector is using a drone as opposed to walking on the roof, given the propensity for an injury if you're walking, if you fall off a roof. Then we're talking about some serious dollars for income replacement. So it becomes much easier piece of business to write if an inspector is using a drone as opposed to going on the roof. But we do have markets for that. And it just depends on what the inspector's need is, if they're a multi-inspector versus a one-person shop. But we have markets for it.
So, Rob, to make that, in addition to owning a carrier that does the E&O and G&L coverage, we also own a fully functioning property and casualty insurance agency and a managing general agent. So whatever policy somebody needs in addition to the E&O and the GL for the business, we can go out and get that from other carriers.
Good. I managed to make it through 14,999 inspections without getting hurt. And it was that 15,000th one. I never fell off the roof. I fell on it, and shattered a bone and tore all the ligaments and was pretty laid up for a while. So that's where it's good to know that. And it's good to let that out there for our members, because in commercial inspections, there's another inherent danger that's lurking. It's an operating other business you're walking through, whether it's a foundry or a machine shop or manufacturing or distribution. And there's dangers around every corner. And so that's where I've always told the other offices I manage to say, consider liabilities, consider personal disability insurance as well. Yeah. And so knowing that they can contact you for basically their entire, I don't want to use the word umbrella, but how about bushel basket full of insurance needs? You guys are there.
We love to be a one-stop shop. And I think that's what business people are generally looking for. They will cut through everything else if why not make it all work out of one place? And that's kind of, again, because we cater to these lines of business as opposed to being confused by them. It puts us in a better position to know what else you might need.
I think there's been memes or things out there about, I ain't got time for that. And so knowing that you guys are in their corner, if you ain't got time for it, then we're in good shape. I think that's gone down my entire list, boys. I know you wrote the policy for my company the last 3 years I was inspecting. I was nothing but pleased with everything that you guys provided. And I'd just love to see our members, make sure that they know their options and know that there's not going to be a ball dropped, which doesn't happen, and there's not a gap, which doesn't happen when they reach out to Elite MGA.
Yeah, and just know too that no matter what happens, we're here to help you with all of them. The incidents, the claims, everything, and we're not gonna hold it against you that you asked for some help. I think that's what we're here to do.
Yeah. Well, let's make a promise that we're going to circle a year from now when we've had a year's worth of claim history in this emerging marketplace. I've been here for a little over 18 months, but let's see where the industry's at and see if there's either some bad or fun stories we can talk about, as well as some huge successes that have been driven by this emerging industry.
Yeah, I look forward to that. And we always, we really like to talk about those topics in particular because, if you can share a little bit of insight with somebody that prevents 5 claims from happening in the future, well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I think it's always entertaining when you can actually see and Joe's done this a number of times when it's at conventions or meetings and giving kind of the anatomy of a claim and what happens with a claim. It's predominantly residential, right? But if at some point having the commercial aspect of it to be able to show inspectors what could happen, what does happen, what role your insurance company plays, and how this all happens, and to know it can happen, but when it does, you're in good hands.
Yeah, that's another company. Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to our next conversation and maybe some forensics.
That sounds great, Rob. We'll be available whenever you're ready.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.